I want to talk to you a little bit more about the special session in the state of Missouri and the reason the governor called this special session to deal specifically with some new pro-life legislation that the governor was in support of. We've got Missouri Senator Bob Onder, Dr. Bob Onder, joining us on the phone right now. Dr. Onder, you've had a busy day. How are you?
Hey, Mark. It's great to be with you. Yeah, I was just on with Tim on Jamie's show this morning. It's always a good day when I speak to Mark Cox and Tim Jones.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Wanted to get your take because my understanding is it was your legislation that passed the Senate. Can you give us a bit more information about what this bill will do?
Well, yeah, that's right. I filed Senate Bill 1 on Monday. The governor called us into special session just about a week ago, and my good friend Andrew Koenig, actually, for all sorts of complicated reasons I won't get into, ended up handling it for me on the floor. So Senator Koenig did a terrific job. But the Senate Bill 1 and then finally Andrew's bill would do a couple of things. One, it would protect pregnancy care centers in the city of St. Louis that were threatened by an abortion sanctuary city ordinance passed by some radical left-wing politicians in the city of St. Louis that would have threatened the valuable work that maternity homes and pregnancy care centers like Our Lady's Inn do. So the bill will protect pregnancy care centers. In addition, an unelected federal judge on May 2nd struck down Missouri's laws in effect for 31 years that treated abortion clinics like any other surgical facility, basically leaving women unprotected from shoddy practices in the abortion industry. So the law will enable the Department of Health to again regulate the health and safety of women in those clinics, and I think that's a good thing. There are some other things that the bill could have done that it ended up not being in the final product, but I think it's a great bill. It will now move on to the Missouri House.
So it's one bill dealing with several different issues, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
It's dealing with the free speech issue in the city of St. Louis, and then the issue of Missouri's health and safety laws being struck down by the federal judge.
You know, I spoke to a lot of people who were critics of that rule, that ordinance by the city of St. Louis when it happened, including the archdiocese here, who basically described what they did is giving special status to abortion providers, special protections under discrimination laws to abortion providers, and potentially fining someone, say a landlord. Let's say the archdiocese owned a piece of property, and Planned Parenthood wanted to put one of their centers in the first floor. The archdiocese couldn't stop them from doing that out of fear of being fined or dragged into court.
That's right. That's exactly right, Mark. Right. If the archdiocese wanted to avoid having one of their properties being used as an abortion clinic, they could be fined, dragged into court, and pro-life groups, organizations, whether it be a maternity home like Our Lady's Inn that provides alternatives to abortion, or for that matter, a Catholic school that wants their religion teachers to teach the teaching of the Catholic Church, and including its teaching on the right to life. If an abortion advocate showed up and said, no, I'm going to teach your kids all about how wonderful abortion is, they could end up, the archdiocese could get sued. Our Lady's Inn could be sued and potentially sued out of business in the case of a small entity like Our Lady's Inn, just because they're trying to live out their mission and live out their conscience as God gives it to them. That's wrong. It's a violation of our First Amendment rights, our rights to freedom of speech, to freedom of religion. And I'm glad we were able to protect Missourians this week.
We're talking to Senator Bob Onder. The other part of the legislation that dealt with this court decision and making sure that these clinics are treated like any other healthcare facility would be. How is this bill different than what the court struck down?
So what the court struck down was a requirement that's been on our books since 1986 that that abortion clinics be regulated as ambulatory care centers. In other words, that they be treated just like the surgery centers where we might get minor outpatient surgery, or where someone might have their cataracts operated on, or even just a routine procedure like a colonoscopy. The abortion clinics wanted to be treated differently. They didn't want to abide by those common sense health and safety standards that apply to other ambulatory surgery centers. And a unelected federal judge, a Carter appointee, actually struck down those standards, and essentially getting rid of any kind of oversight by the Missouri Department of Health on abortion clinics. So we had to do something to protect Missouri women. I mean, we may not agree with, or we may view as tragic, the choice of a woman to get an abortion, but Missouri women deserve the protection, the health and safety standards that other patients in Missouri deserve, and that's that we want to give. We gave back to the Missouri Department of Health that authority to enforce common sense safety standards.
Sure seems like common sense. I'm not quite sure why you wouldn't want to be covered by those regulations, but I also heard, Senator, that there was some language about allowing ambulances, if they had to be called to one of these clinics, that before they had to only use like the back entrance or something like this, I guess, to avoid alarming the patients up front.
Yeah, we learned. The Senate Sanctity of Life Committee, and I was honored to serve on that committee, learned when we were investigating Planned Parenthood that the Planned Parenthood was instructing EMS not to use their sirens, to come around back, instructing clinic personnel not to tell EMS or 911 that the call was related to abortion, to give only a, quote, vague summary, and not to let the EMS workers, the paramedics, into the procedure rooms. I mean, this is an appalling violation of the standard of care in other areas of medical practice. So one of the provisions of the bill that unfortunately got taken out in committee would have prohibited abortion clinics from interfering with emergency personnel doing their job to help women.
So that got watered down a little bit, in other words.
That got taken out. Yeah, there were several provisions that got taken out, unfortunately. Again, the final product was still a good bill, but that was just such a common sense provision that that I was disappointed to not see that in the final bill.
And I'm guessing is it a foregone conclusion the House will pass this?
Well, the House will definitely pass a pro-life bill. The big question will be whether they pass this bill in its present form, or whether they add additional measures to it. I always say the House will do what the House does, and we'll see. It's a process, though, Mark, and there could be another couple of steps before the bill gets to the governor's desk. Well,
Senator, let me ask your opinion on this. There was some controversy over the calling of these special sessions, this being the second one now, the expense to the government, whether or not this was an extraordinary reason to have to call legislators back. How do you feel about that, or is there a difference between this session and the last one, in your point of view?
Well, I supported the first session as well, but this, there's no question that it met the standard of extraordinary. It was only on May 2nd that Judge Sachs issued that appalling ruling that immediately put the health and safety of Missouri women in jeopardy.
Okay.
And it was only a couple of months ago that the St. Louis Board of Aldermen issued that passed that terrible ordinance that threatened pregnancy care centers. So we can't wait a year to maybe do something next May that would maybe go into effect next August 28th. We had to take action to protect Missourians.
Senator Onder, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.
Happy Father's Day, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too, Mark.
All right, thanks. I wanted to get Senator Onder on. I knew he had a lot to do with putting that bill together. Kind of sorry to hear that it got watered down in committee a little bit, it appears. Some things were kind of taken out of it, it looks like, at the last minute. I don't know why you wouldn't want to get emergency care into a facility as quickly as possible if there was a need for emergency care. I'm not quite sure what the goal is there, other than to maybe make people in the front half of the facility realize that there's a little more risk to this procedure than they might want to lead you to believe. So that might have something to do with that. So got that out of the way. Wanted you to understand what's going on down there. I'm going to go ahead and get to a break. We've got the folks from Show Me coming up next. We're going to talk about the city again and, some of the ways that they've used subsidies over the years, the amount of money they've basically given away through these subsidies, and the fact that some of that may be changing. We'll get some of your phone calls as well. We've